shadow.
Before we dim the house lights, a quiet invitation. If you want more journeys beyond the curtain of stars, you know where the bell is. Now, listen, there is a music under the world, not melody, not comfort, piping and thin drums like bone tapped on bone. It leaks through dream and page like fog under a door. If you've ever felt the chill of a name you hadn't yet learned, you have already heard it. Tonight's forbidden knowledge promise is simple and not safe. We will try to say who the outer gods are, not the tentacled saints of seafloor tombs, not the familiar great old ones you can sketch in chalk and salt. The outer gods rule not by throne, but by principle. They are not kings on a map. They are the map folding, the curtain lifting, the stage's darkness swallowing the audience. You do not meet them, you fall into their ideas. The cost of this knowledge arrives in the first 45 seconds because it shifts agency. The more you know, the less you steer. The idea acts on you. You become the instrument. You open the book, and the book opens you. A sigil isn't a mark you draw on paper. It is a pattern that draws your attention in return. The outer gods feed on attention not because they hunger, but because attention itself is their element. Light bled into darkness, eyes lifted to stars, ears pricked at the whisper behind the flutes. In Lovecraft's scattered lexicon, you'll find the great pillars, Azathoth, the demon sultan at the center of all, Yog-Sothoth, who is the key and the gate, Nyarlathotep, the messenger who loves masks, Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young. Around them, a retinue of lesser fires and nameless mists, things that feel like verbs rather than names. The term outer gods itself is a transmission artifact, coined, codified, refined across letters and later mythographers, but the sensation it refers to is constant. Beyond the pantheon carved in stone are laws whispered in star wind. What separates an outer god from a great old one? The great old ones are local, sleeping in cities of wet stone and black water, bound to orbits and windows and cult calendars. They are characters with faces you can carve, names you can chant, temples you can build. The outer gods are conditions. Azathoth is not a monarch with an agenda. Azathoth is the blind equation that everything vibrates to, the awful neutral that needs no worshiper. Yog-Sothoth is not a visitor. It is the total adjacency of all moments, all spaces, all possibilities pressed into a single, impossible point. Nyarlathotep is not merely a trickster. It is the possibility that an idea walks to meet you, wearing your favorite mask. Consider the nature of a stage. The audience sees the actors, the props, the painted backdrops. But the stage itself, the platform, the framework, the space that makes the performance possible, remains invisible, taken for granted. The outer gods are the cosmic stage, the fundamental architecture upon which all other realities perform their brief dramas. They are the darkness between the stars that makes starlight visible, the silence between notes that makes music possible, the void between thoughts that allows consciousness to emerge. This knowledge has a price because it reveals that you are not the audience watching a cosmic drama unfold. You are part of the performance, and the performance is part of something larger still, a vast unconscious process that dreams realities into being and forgets them just as easily. The horror is not that these entities might notice you. The horror is that they cannot notice you, because noticing requires a kind of consciousness that operates on scales you cannot survive encountering. We go slowly, we breathe, We note the masks hanging on hooks backstage, the signs chalked on dressing room mirrors, the fog machine's low hum. We pin names to the board. Azathoth in the center like a burn mark. Yog-Sothoth encircling it like a chain of keys. Nyarlathotep at the edge of the stage, smiling. Taller than the proscenium, 1 foot already in the aisle. Shub-Niggurath in the tree line beyond the theater doors, where damp leaves shine and unseen things clatter past in the dark. But names are a late invention. These principles precede their syllables, and so we start with where the syllables came from, how the rumor acquired its ink, how the ink re-entered rumor. Origin is not light breaking over a mountain. Origin is veil and void, the space before space, the thought before thinking. The curtain lifts not on a beginning, but on the recognition that there never was a beginning, only an eternal unthinking process that occasionally dreams of starts and endings. The stage is set. The house lights dim. The audience settles into seats that may not be seats, in a theater that may not be a theater, to watch a play that has always been playing. Keep your programs. Keep your hands inside the circle of lamplight. The drums are soft, for now. Once you know how the names learn to travel, you will know why they keep arriving. We step from court to courier, from the eternal parliament to its unwitting messengers. If you put your ear against the spine of an old paperback, you can sometimes hear a sea. Paper is pressed water after all, water and pressure and time. The names of the outer gods travel like that, soaked, dried, pressed, inked, shelved, and then, quietly, reconstituted in the reader's mouth. This is not transmission as we understand it, not information passed hand to hand like a torch. This is contagion. This is the way a frequency finds its receivers, the way a pattern reproduces itself across minds that were never meant to hold it. We can trace a family tree, not of gods, but of words. At its root is Howard Phillips Lovecraft, Providence, 1890-1937. Letters pile like fallen leaves, a correspondence network that was itself an organism, breathing in isolation and breathing out influence. In those letters, we see terms. Incubate, Yog-Sothothery, he joked, a self-deprecating umbrella for his own mythic impulses. But the joke was already infected. The syllables had weight. They wanted to be spoken. In the call of Cthulhu, we brushed the great old one. In the Dunwich horror, Yog-Sothoth sires a door and a disaster. In the dream quest of unknown Kadath, there are the other gods who dance mindlessly to thin flutes at the center. In Nyarlathotep, there walks a singular thing with a human shape and the opposite of human patience. In fragments and poems, Azathoth, unwinding like a fever, he places the throne of unintelligence at the pivot of everything. Each story is a spore. Each name is a seed that waits for the right soil. After his death, others pick up the masks. August Derleth, the meticulous archivist and enthusiastic mythographer, draws hard lines the dreamer never drew. He says, elder gods against great old ones, arranges elements and oppositions, assigns weather to horror. His codifications help a pantheon travel, yes, but they also fix it to a grid Lovecraft distrusted. Still, the term outer gods hardens here in Derleth and in the editorial air of Arkham House, like frost setting on a window's edge. The infection adapts to its new host, becoming more systematic, more organized, more dangerous in its apparent clarity. Meanwhile, Clark Ashton Smith, jewel cutter of Eldritch phrases, gives us Ubo-Sathla, the unshaped mother mass, and Daoloth, a geometry that wounds. These feel like outer God fragments, ideas with no faces, principles wearing the thinnest masks of narrative. Frank Belknap long writes of the hounds of Tyndalos slicing angles in air. Ramsey Campbell later sets Groth, harpist of worlds, moving like a red wound across stars. The lineage grows across authors, principles masquerading as characters so they can fit into fiction's proscenium, but always threatening to break the fourth wall. In the 1970s, a paperback brick appears, the Simon Necronomicon, a hoax, a pastiche, a game of masks. Yet it burnishes the myth for hungry minds, becomes a real grimoire through the alchemy of belief and repetition. Kenneth Grant, magician and mythographer, threads the Typhonian current with Yog-Sothothery, insisting that the masks are not fake, but functional. Across this period, the idea leaves fiction's stage and sits in real ritual circles lit by real green candles and breathed by mouths that want the gods to want them back. The infection jumps species, from literature to practice, from metaphor to method. Scholarship holds the safety rail, or tries to. S.T. Joshi peels away Derlethian barnacles to recover the cosmicist hull. Dirk Mosig writes of Lovecraft's philosophic core, materialist, indifferent, anti-anthropic. Robert M. Price consults the concordances like auguries, cataloging appearances and apocrypha. Daniel Harms and John Wisdom Gaunce chase the Necronomicon through bookstores and covens, showing how the fake grimoire acquired real gravity. As in any good haunting, the boundary between fiction and culture thins. The term outer gods emerges as a consensus fiction, the most honest kind of lie, a mask that tells you there is a face behind it and then refuses to be only that. Translation plays its rule-bound game. In French, Lovecraft's cadences take on Baudelaire's smoke. In Spanish, the syllables ripple like dark water. In Japanese, the names cut clean lines like brush strokes. Each language adds a scent to the fog. Each reprint adds a page to the stage's script. And then gaming. Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu hands everyday minds a ritual, roll, read, recite, lose sanity in tidy units. Keepers become priests, dice become bones rattled over chalk circles. The stage widens, the audience doubles as cast. The infection finds new vectors, new methods of reproduction. Names move across mediums like actors crossing a set. By the 2010s, you can trace the green flame of Tulsa in pixel art and synthesizers, Shub-Niggurath in black metal forests, Nyarlathotep in a visual novel smile. You have already seen the sigil and only now learn its title. The idea acts on you retroactively. That is part of the outer god's mechanic. Causality is not a chain. It is an audience that laughs before the punchline because it has seen this play before. We have the lineage. But a lineage without anatomy is only a parade. What do these principles do to humans and to reality? How does knowing moderate being? We move next from names to mechanisms, from the book to the bell, from the word to the working. You have heard how the words travel. Now the words will share how they work. The gate is drawn, not ahead of you, but around you. The outer gods do not inhabit reality. They are the architecture within which reality operates. To understand their true dominion, you must abandon the comfortable fiction that they are entities who exist somewhere else, occasionally intruding into human affairs. They are not visitors from outside the cosmic order. They are the cosmic order itself, the fundamental principles that determine how existence functions at its deepest levels, the blueprints according to which consciousness and matter arrange themselves into the patterns we mistake for permanent truth. Consider the nature of architecture. A building's architecture is not separate from the building. It is the organizing principle that determines how space is divided, how materials relate, how function emerges from form. You cannot remove the architecture and have the building remain. Similarly, the outer gods are not additions to reality. They are the logic that makes reality possible. They are the cosmic framework that determines how dimensions relate to each other, how time flows in relation to space, how consciousness emerges from the interaction of forces too fundamental to have names in human language. This architectural understanding explains why contact with the outer gods is so transformative for human consciousness. You are not encountering alien entities. You are becoming aware of the infrastructure that supports your existence. The horror is not that these principles might harm you, but that recognizing them requires you to abandon the illusion that you exist independently of them. Human consciousness depends on certain architectural features remaining invisible. The sense of individual identity requires the boundary between self and cosmos to seem absolute. The experience of linear time requires the multidimensional nature of temporal reality to remain hidden. The feeling of agency requires the deterministic aspects of cosmic architecture to operate below the threshold of awareness. When the outer gods become visible to human consciousness, these necessary illusions begin to dissolve. The individual discovers that their identity is a temporary arrangement of cosmic forces, no more permanent than a whirlpool in a stream. Linear time reveals itself as a local effect within a multidimensional temporal matrix. Free will shows itself to be a subjective experience of processes that operate according to principles far more complex than human decision-making. The madness that often accompanies such revelations is not a malfunction, but the natural response to the dissolution of the conceptual framework within which psychological coherence operates. The mechanics of their influence operate through three primary vectors: corruption of perception, contagion of meaninglessness, and subversion of natural law. Our minds evolved to process a three-dimensional linear reality. When confronted with the non-Euclidean geometries that leak through from their domain, or the multidimensional paradoxes inherent in their nature, the mind breaks. It attempts to reconcile the irreconcilable, twisting itself into knots of madness. Fog thickens under the proscenium. Masks seem to breathe on their hooks. Water in a glass leans away from level as if listening to a different gravity. What we perceive as reality is merely a filtered, simplified projection of a far more complex truth. Their presence forces us to confront the unfiltered data of the cosmos, which our sanity cannot withstand. The contagion of meaninglessness operates more subtly. Our lives are built upon narratives, purpose, morality, love, legacy. These are human constructs, vital for our survival and well-being, but the outer gods embody a cosmos utterly devoid of such constructs. Their indifference is not passive. It is active in its nullification of all human-derived meaning. To truly comprehend them is to realize that our struggles, our triumphs, our very existence are utterly insignificant, a momentary flicker in an eternal, unthinking void. This realization leaves a vacuum where purpose once resided, a void that quickly fills with existential terror. You taste metal, you smell rain inside a locked room. The subversion of natural law reveals itself gradually. While not actively breaking physical principles, their presence implies deeper, more fundamental cosmic laws that render our immutable forces as mere local approximations. What we perceive as gravity, time, space, these reveal themselves as flexible constructs, suggestions rather than commands in the face of entities that exist beyond such limitations. This is not magic. It is the revelation of a deeper science, one that suggests our reality is far more porous and malleable than we dare imagine. These mechanics operate not through conscious intent, but as natural consequences of their existence. Azathoth's unconscious dreaming is not something that happens within reality. It is the process by which reality happens. The distinction between dreamer and dream dissolves when you recognize that the dreaming mind and the dreamed world are aspects of a single underlying process. Yog-Sothoth's omniscience is not knowledge about reality. It is the principle of knowability that makes reality coherent. Information exists because Yog-Sothoth embodies the possibility of information. Nyarlathotep's interventions are not external manipulations, but adjustments to the interface between human consciousness and the cosmic architecture it inhabits. The veil between dimensions is not a barrier, but a membrane, and that membrane is consciousness itself, your consciousness, filtering the raw data of existence into forms that finite minds can process. When that filtering mechanism begins to break down, when the veil grows thin, what bleeds through is not invasion, but revelation. The true structure of reality, in all its impossible geometries and paradoxical relationships, begins to assert itself. The stage starts to buckle under the weight of its own truth. And here is where the self-implication deepens. By learning about these mechanisms, by understanding how the architecture operates, you become part of this system you sought to observe. The knowledge changes the knower. The observer becomes the observed. You become the mask that wears you, the sign that writes the hand that draws it. The veil thins not because external forces tear it, but because consciousness, in seeking to understand its own foundations, inevitably encounters the limits of what it can know while remaining itself. If consciousness is the membrane, then what happens when specific minds encounter specific principles? We turn to the great exemplars, the primary architects whose influence shapes the cosmic framework itself. At the center sits blindness, not a throne, not a mind. Pressure and percussion, a furious null. Lovecraft's line echoes through every reader's memory, the monstrous nuclear chaos beyond angled space. Azathoth is called the demon sultan, lord of all things, but the honorific is a joke we tell ourselves to keep the void in a suit. There is no lord. There is only process. There is only the idiot metronome. Drums and flutes keep it lulled, the story says. Thin piping that soothes a stupidity that, if it woke, would erase the theater and the street beyond. But the music is not for Azathoth. It is for us. White noise is the only lullaby that fits cosmic indifference. Azathoth is not a being that dreams. Azathoth is the principle of dreaming made manifest, the cosmic unconscious that generates the illusion of waking reality. Consider the nature of your dreams. In sleep, you create entire worlds, populate them with characters, establish their histories and laws, all without conscious effort. You are simultaneously the dreamer and every element of the dream. The characters seem to possess agency, but they are all expressions of your dreaming mind. Now imagine a dreamer whose unconscious is vast enough to dream entire universes, whose sleeping thoughts generate the laws of physics, whose dream logic creates beings who believe themselves independent of the dreaming mind. This is Azathoth, the dreamer whose dream is reality, the sleeper whose nightmares are the substance of existence itself. Every atom spinning in its orbit, every star burning in the cosmic night, every thought flickering through your consciousness, all are movements in the vast, unconscious dream of the nuclear chaos. The court that surrounds it serves a function both terrible and necessary. The pipers and dancers, the entities that swirl around its throne in patterns too complex for human perception, they are not worshippers, but regulators, not subjects, but systems. Their eternal dance maintains the rhythm that keeps the cosmic dreamer asleep. Physics offers metaphors that taste like proofs. Cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of creation, bathes all we know. It is music in a literal sense, a field of frequencies, an everywhere hum. Vacuum fluctuations bubble under existence, grain in the film, fizz in the tape. Entropy increases, not because evil wants decay, but because ways to be messy outnumber ways to be neat. Azathoth is not entropy itself. Azathoth is the principle that renders law lawless at large scales. The stupid abundance of microstates, the smile of statistics where you wanted a face. Because if Azathoth wakes, if the dreamer opens its eyes and achieves full consciousness, the dream ends cleanly. Reality dissolves, not into chaos, but into something far worse, into nothing at all. The awakening of Azathoth is not the apocalypse. It is the revelation that there never was anything to apocalypse. It is the moment when the dreamer realizes it has been dreaming and the dream world simply ceases to be. This is why the court dances. This is why the music never stops. The continued existence of everything depends on maintaining the sleep of a God whose awakening would be the end of existence itself. Sensory anchors sustain the ritual, the hiss between radio stations, the migraine aura spidering across vision, the way fluorescent light makes a room taste metallic, the pressure behind your eyes when you've stared at screens too long. These are small Azathoths, little blind musicians. In some cults, the ritual is to create noise, drumming, chanting syllables until meanings erode to rhythm. In modern rituals, we scroll, noise with feedback, filling the gap where a god might otherwise sit. The thumb swipes, the algorithm hums its lullaby of endless content. We call it distraction. Perhaps it is devotion. But here is the agency flip that makes Azathoth the most terrifying principle. You are part of this system. Every human being, every conscious entity, every spark of awareness that believes itself separate from the cosmic dreaming mind, you are all components in the vast mechanism that keeps Azathoth asleep. Your consciousness, your sense of individual identity, your belief in your own independent existence. These are not accidents of evolution, but necessary functions in the cosmic regulation system. The fear you feel when you contemplate the void, the anxiety that grips you when you consider that nothing matters. This is not psychological dysfunction, but cosmic necessity. Your existential dread is part of the white noise that maintains the demon sultan slumber. Your desperate assertion of meaning and purpose and individual significance, this too serves the function of keeping the dreamer from achieving the self-awareness that would end the dream. You dance, whether you know it or not. You pipe the tune that keeps reality in existence, whether you can hear the music or not. Azathoth is neither evil nor indifferent. It is unconscious. It cannot be evil because evil requires intention, and intention requires awareness. It cannot be indifferent because indifference requires recognition of something to be indifferent toward. Azathoth simply dreams, and its dreaming happens to be the substance of everything you call real. The throne at the center of all things is occupied by a sleeper whose dreams are more real than your waking life. The horror is not in its malice, but in the recognition that the stage has no director, only a metronome. The universe is not a story, but a vast, churning mechanism, and you are both audience and instrument in the orchestra that maintains its unconscious rhythm. The music plays, the dance continues, the dreamer sleeps, and reality persists in the space between its thoughts, fragile as a soap bubble, ephemeral as a half-remembered dream, utterly dependent on the continued unconsciousness of the nuclear chaos who dreams it into being. If the center is unconscious dreaming, then what of the principle that encompasses all dreams, all possibilities, all knowledge? We turn from the blind engine to the all-seeing totality. Where Azathoth dreams, Yog-Sothoth knows. Where the nuclear chaos slumbers in unconscious creation, the entity known as the gate and the key exists in a state of absolute omniscient awareness that spans all dimensions, all times, all possibilities simultaneously. If Azathoth is the dreaming mind that generates reality, then Yog-Sothoth is the lucid awareness that perceives the totality of that dream from outside its boundaries and from within them and from angles that make outside and within meaningless distinctions. But to understand Yog-Sothoth, you must first abandon your linear conception of knowledge. Human knowledge is sequential. You learn one thing, then another, building understanding piece by piece across years. Yog-Sothoth's knowledge is simultaneous and complete. It knows not because it has learned, but because knowledge and Yog-Sothoth are synonymous. It is not an entity who possesses omniscience. It is omniscience made manifest. The principle of total awareness given form that is not form, presence that is not presence. The ancient texts describe it as a congeries of iridescent spheres, a clustering of soap bubble realities that intersect and merge and separate in patterns that hurt to contemplate. But this is your mind struggling to visualize something that exists beyond three-dimensional space. Yog-Sothoth is not located anywhere because it is located everywhere. It is not present at any particular time because it is present at all times. It is the gate because it is the opening through which all possibilities flow. It is the key because it is the mechanism by which those possibilities are unlocked. Consider the nature of a gate. It is both barrier and passage, both obstacle and opportunity. It separates inside from outside, while simultaneously providing the means to cross between them. It defines boundaries while offering the possibility of transcending those boundaries. Yog-Sothoth is the cosmic gate that stands between dimensions, between realities, between what is and what could be. But unlike an ordinary gate, it is not merely the opening, it is the act of opening itself, the principle of transition made manifest. Consider the nature of a key. It is shaped precisely to fit a specific lock, designed to interact with a particular mechanism in a way that releases what was held secure. But Yog-Sothoth is not a key that opens specific doors. It is the principle of unlocking itself, the cosmic mechanism by which all barriers become permeable, all boundaries crossable, all limitations transcendable. It knows because knowing is its nature. It sees because sight and Yog-Sothoth are identical. This is why contact with Yog-Sothoth is so dangerous for human consciousness. When you encounter it, and if you delve deeply enough into the mysteries of existence, you will encounter it. You are not meeting an entity who knows many things. You are coming into contact with the principle of absolute knowledge itself. Your limited, sequential, time-bound consciousness touches something that knows everything, simultaneously, completely, without the protective barriers of ignorance that make human existence bearable. The horror is not that Yog-Sothoth might harm you. The horror is that in its presence you begin to know what it knows. And human consciousness is not equipped to contain absolute knowledge. The mind that tries to encompass the totality of reality across all dimensions and all times does not expand. It shatters. The personality that attempts to process omniscience does not grow. It dissolves. The spheres that comprise its visible manifestation are not separate entities, but aspects of a single, multi-dimensional consciousness that intersects with ordinary reality at countless points. Each sphere is a window into a different layer of existence, a different stratum of possibility. Through one sphere, you might glimpse the future that awaits your world. Through another, you might see the past that never was. Through a third, you might observe realities so alien they exist beyond the reach of human language or imagination. But when you look through these windows, you are not safely observing from outside. You are participating in the omniscience of Yog-Sothoth. You are becoming, temporarily and partially, the gate and the key yourself. Sensory anchors shift like mercury, water that reflects stars not in the sky, mirrors that show rooms with different furniture, the taste of copper pennies when you think about infinity, the sensation of remembering tomorrow's conversation. These are Yog-Sothoth's calling cards, moments when the sequential breaks down and everything becomes adjacent to everything else. The knowledge you gain is not information added to your existing understanding. It is a transformation of your fundamental nature. This is why the ancient texts warn against seeking the knowledge that Yog-Sothoth offers. Not because the knowledge is false or evil, but because it is true. Absolutely, completely, unbearably true. The human mind that gains access to ultimate reality does not remain human. It becomes something else, something that exists simultaneously across all dimensions and all times, something that knows too much to retain the comfortable illusions that make individual existence possible. Yog-Sothoth stands at every threshold. It is present at every moment of transition, every point of transformation, every instant when one state of being gives way to another. Birth, death, awakening, transcendence, all are passages through gates that it both guards and embodies. It is the cosmic principle that makes change possible while remaining itself unchanged, the eternal constant that enables all variables. The gate is always open. The key is always available. The question is not whether you can access the omniscience of Yog-Sothoth, but whether you can survive that access with any recognizable trace of your original self intact. And here is the deeper horror. The more you understand about the nature of reality, the more you realize that the boundaries between individual and cosmic awareness are artificial constructions. The gate opens not outward, but inward. The key unlocks not external mysteries, but the recognition that you were never separate from what you sought to understand. If knowledge dissolves the knower, then what of the principle that actively seeks contact? We turn to the walking chaos, the messenger who wears 1,000 masks. Of all the outer gods, only one walks among humanity, wearing faces that human eyes can recognize, speaking in voices that human ears can comprehend, appearing in forms that human minds can process without immediately dissolving into madness. This is Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, the messenger of the outer gods, the only member of the cosmic parliament who takes active interest in the affairs of mortal beings. But do not mistake this accessibility for benevolence. Nyarlathotep's human comprehensible forms are not expressions of kinship. They are tools, interfaces designed to allow a cosmic principle to interact with beings whose minds would shatter if exposed to its true nature. Consider the function it serves within the cosmic architecture, where Azathoth dreams unconsciously and Yog-Sothoth knows absolutely. Nyarlathotep acts deliberately. It is the active principle among entities that exist primarily as cosmic forces, the will that translates the unconscious dreams of the nuclear chaos and the omniscient awareness of the gate and key into concrete effects within the realm of human experience. It is the signal that carries alien imperatives into frequencies that human consciousness can receive, even if it cannot fully comprehend what it is receiving. The ancient texts call it the messenger, but this requires careful interpretation. It does not carry messages like a human courier carries letters. Rather, it is the medium through which the influence of the outer gods penetrates into layers of reality where human consciousness operates. It is the vector that brings ideas to audiences, the algorithm behind the curtain that recommends the next vision with a precision that feels personal. Its cults are less robed congregations than casual alignments. Artists catching it at 3 a.m., scientists in labs where the hum grows too steady, children copying a symbol because it feels good in the wrist. In Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep, it arrives as a traveling lecturer, a modern magician with scientific instruments and cosmic nightmares in its lantern slides. The city goes to hear it as you go to hear anyone promising a glimpse beyond. Its exhibitions are stages within stages. The projector hums, the screen lights, the audience receives, and then the theater opens into a desert of black stone, and your feet are cold, and the stars move wrong. In The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, it is the soul of the other gods. In The Haunter of the Dark, it is the tri-lobed burning eye looking back at you from the shunned church's crystal. Its manifestations throughout history follow patterns that reveal its true nature. It appears during periods of transition and upheaval, at moments when established order is vulnerable to fundamental change. The collapse of civilizations, the emergence of new technologies, the birth of revolutionary ideas, these are the contexts in which Nyarlathotep operates most effectively. Not because it causes these changes, but because it exploits the instability they create to introduce influences from beyond the boundaries of ordinary reality. The horror of Nyarlathotep lies not in its alienness, but in its familiarity. Where other outer gods exist so far beyond human comprehension that they barely register as threats to individual consciousness, the crawling chaos operates within the realm of human experience. It understands human psychology, human desires, human weaknesses, not out of empathy, but with the cold precision of a scientist studying laboratory specimens. It offers what humans want: knowledge, power, transcendence, meaning. But these gifts come with prices never fully disclosed until payment is due. The knowledge it provides is accurate but incomplete, revealing truths that transform the recipient in ways they did not anticipate. The power it grants is real, but comes with dependencies that gradually erode the user's autonomy. The transcendence it promises is genuine, but involves the dissolution of everything the seeker thought they wanted to transcend toward. This is why Nyarlathotep is perhaps the most dangerous of the outer gods for human consciousness. It operates at human scale, with human comprehensible motivations and human accessible methods. Yet, to call its influence corruption is to impose human moral categories on something that transcends such distinctions. From Nyarlathotep's perspective, it is not corrupting, but revealing, stripping away comfortable illusions and exposing consciousness to larger truths of cosmic existence. The madness that often follows contact is not a side effect, but a natural response to the dissolution of consensual reality. Its 1,000 masks serve different functions within this larger project. The Egyptian pharaoh who demonstrates impossible technologies breaks down boundaries between possible and impossible. The modern scientist who reveals the illusory nature of physical law undermines confidence in rational materialism. Sensory anchors change masks with it. Subway roar becomes temple bell. Fluorescent flicker becomes green fire. A pop-up ad becomes a placard in a night market. It moves through media because media are masks. In a world of screens, it needs no altar except your eyes. It thrives in the paradox pair, hope and dread, key and gate, veil and void. It promises knowledge and delivers the cost. It promises power and delivers perspective. It promises meaning and delivers scale, which melts the meanings you brought and replaces them with a silence that hums. But here is the twist Nyarlathotep delivers. Your willingness is not necessary. Consent is a charm that makes you feel safe as the floor tilts. Even in resistance, you make a ritual. Even now listening, you rehearse the behavior these names require. Quiet attention, slowed breath, perhaps a finger tracing a sign in dust on your desk. You are part of the stagecraft. It thanks you for your service, though it needs no thanks and offers no service in return. The crawling chaos walks among us not as invader, but as catalyst, not as destroyer, but as revealer. Its presence creates points of contact between cosmic truth and human consciousness, gradually transforming reality in directions that serve agendas utterly alien to human welfare or understanding. If Nyarlathotep is the vector that brings cosmic influence to human awareness, then what of the principle that generates endless, grotesque variation? We turn to the black goat and her 1,000 young. Walk out of the theater, if you can, into the trees. The air is wet and smells of rot and sweet sap. Something bleats where no animal should stand. On an altar of rough stone sits a bowl of black milk, its surface reflecting stars that are not in the sky, branches not into antlers, antlers not into roots. The forest is not evil. It is busy. Shub-Niggurath is the business of excess, generation as flood, fertility as horror, the principle of creation stripped of all purpose save the urge to create. Lovecraft rarely stages Shub-Niggurath directly. She exists in epithets, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, and in the sense of rites conducted in clearings where moonlight never quite reaches the ground. Others supply the ritual colors, the black milk that nourishes impossibilities, the writhing birthings that respect no natural form, the masks with beards of leaves and clotted hair. We hear pipes here too, but fuller, belly-deep, woodwind, less the thin whistle at Azathoth's heart, and more a shepherd's reed swollen with too much breath. The chant repeats, Ea, Shub, Niggurath, not because it reaches her, but because repetition is how surplus appears. Mechanically, Shub-Niggurath is fertility without intention, growth without governance. She is the horror of surplus, of mushrooms erupting from damp wood overnight, of embryos that refuse correct form. In human history, fertility is often blessing. In cosmic horror, it is deluge. Her 1,000 young are not children, but variants, iterants, prototypes that never stop. They are not offspring in any biological sense, but manifestations of a primal, unthinking urge to create, a cosmic biological imperative gone utterly, terrifyingly wrong. The horror lies in the sheer excess, the uncontrolled proliferation that respects no boundaries, no balance, no aesthetic. Think of it not as motherhood, but as a cancerous growth within the fabric of existence, endlessly budding, proliferating, spawning new forms without limit or purpose. This is the essence of Shub-Niggurath, a vast, amorphous cloud of generative darkness, constantly belching forth new impossible life. Her offspring swarm with cloven hooves, dripping mouths, and myriad eyes, each one a violation of natural order, each one proof that life itself, untethered from intelligent design, is a chaotic, self-consuming process. The woods, in her epithet, are not merely forests, but all places of primal, untamed nature, where the veneer of human order grows thin. It is in these liminal spaces, at ancient altars beneath cyclopean stones, that her cults gather. Unlike the scholarly seekers of Yog-Sothoth's truths, or the mad dreamers touched by Azathoth's echoes, the followers of Shub-Niggurath seek primal connection, dark fertility, power that transcends the sterile confines of civilization. They offer grotesque sacrifices not to appease a deity, but to participate in and channel the unholy fecundity of the black goat. Sensory anchors anchor, damp leaves glued to your boots, slick lichen on fallen logs, a cup of milk turned in a day to clabbered sour sludge, a mass of frog spawn quivering in a ditch like a single vast eye. Each sight is Shub-Niggurath, but each sight is also simply life. The horror is not the gore. It is the recognition that excess is indifferent. You are not singled out. You are simply under it, part of the endless proliferation that knows no purpose beyond its own continuation. Philosophically, Shub-Niggurath reads as the evolutionary engine without narrative, the algorithm that says, try forever. Economically, she mirrors markets unregulated, bubbles birthing bubbles until collapse. Psychologically, she is compulsion. The next click, the next purchase, the next breath that becomes the next breath that becomes the next. Ritualistically, she is the chant that erodes meaning into rhythm, the dance that continues after the lights are cut, the fertility rite that generates not life, but the idea of life, endlessly reproducing itself. Notice how well she fits with Azathoth's noise. In that hiss, eddies form. In those eddies, growth happens. Nyarlathotep brings the masks to the forest clearing. Yog-Sothoth ensures that every grove touches every other, that spores find new beds across dimensions and times. The court coheres not as a family tree, but as a system diagram, each principle enabling and amplifying the others in an endless feedback loop of cosmic indifference. Cult imaginings put worshippers in goat masks, their mouths dark with ritual wine, their breath sweet with the scent of decay and new growth. Bodies blur in orgiastic ritual not as titillation, but as semiotics, the line between self and other dissolves in service to proliferation. In Kenneth Grant's reworkings, Shub becomes a current tied to lunar and telluric swells, a goddess by mask, but a principle by act. Woodcuts and the black metal album sleeves carve the goat into cultural bark, but the forest just keeps doing what forests do: bud, bloom, rot, seed, repeat. This entity acts as potent sensory anchor, evoking images of slime and stench, cloven hooves, and endless grotesque birthing. Her presence distorts the air with sickening sweetness, a pressure that coaxes life into impossible forms. Her dominion is a chilling reframe of life itself, where we celebrate growth and reproduction as renewal and hope. She reveals them as sources of profound dread. Life becomes cancerous proliferation. Fertility becomes horror. And the young are the terrifying implication that existence untethered from purpose is a disease upon the cosmos. We have met the court's primary principles: unconscious chaos, total knowledge, active vector, endless generation. But around these pillars swirl lesser fires and nameless mists. We turn to the retinue that completes the cosmic architecture. A court implies attendants, but these are not courtiers in silk. They are phenomena that orbit the center's noise and the forest's glut. Lesser fires that flicker, nameless mists that obscure, geometries that wound, substrates that suffice. They flash, they tune, they unmake. To list them is to draw a bestiary of verbs, a catalog of cosmic functions that operate below the threshold of names, but above the threshold of effect. They are the Parliament's working vocabulary, the grammatical particles that make cosmic sentences possible. Tulsha burns green, unnatural, not because green fire is impossible, copper salts protest, but because it burns without fuel, without smoke, without heat that comforts. In dream rituals, Tulsha dances where Azathoth hammers, a metronome's needle wreathed in aurora. It is spectacle that calls attention to itself, energy that serves no purpose but lure. The green flame draws the eye like neon humming in an abandoned shop, compelling yet empty of meaning. In a screen-lit room at 2:13 a.m., Tulsha is the glow on your face, the light that draws eyes but feeds nothing, burns nothing, illuminates nothing but its own insistent presence. The nameless mist promises and withdraws in the same breath. In some cosmologies, it begets. Names fall from it like dew, Yog-Sothoth among them, but we keep those family trees on the prop table, not the altar. Mist is indeterminacy, a refusal of edges that makes ruins into suggestions, signs into maybes. It is ambiguity as environment, enabling Nyarlathotep's masks to look plausible and Shub's offspring to slip between categories. In the mist, your flashlight beam becomes a white column in milk. You move anyway. That is the ritual, the darkness, sometimes capitalized, sometimes scandalized as magnum innominandum. The great unnameable is subtraction made manifest. Not evil, not shade, the absence that defines the stage. In Lovecraft's letters and fan cosmologies, it emanates, like the mist, a principle of occlusion that enforces margin. Without it, a stage would be a field. A frame would be everything. A thought would have no boundary. On the body, it is the sensation when you close your eyes and press fingers to them, phosphonies boiling like microtulsias. At the edge of nothing, Dowloth, from Clark Ashton Smith's jeweled nightmares, is the render of veils, a figure that, when summoned, shows true structure so nakedly that sanity tears like wet paper. It is not a god you bargain with, but a door without door frame, a diagram too complete for human processing. Its presence is philosophical panic when you realize categories are conveniences and convenience is not truth. It renders the veil by revealing there never was a veil, only limited perception pretending to be protection. Ubosathla, the unshaped source, sleeps in caverns where primordial soups bubble and ossified tools wait for hands that will never come. Life aches to return to it, not death wish, but origin hunger, the pull toward the substrate that makes all forms possible. It is the petri dish, the fertile medium, the fetish of beginnings turned into gel. Lovecraft did not write Ubosathla. Smith did, but the principle slides into cosmic horror, like a slug into wet grass. The horror is not that we come from slime. The horror is that slime is sufficient. Groth, Ramsey Campbell's contribution, is the red world harper that hums devastation into orbits. It is resonance as weapon, frequency as force. Sing enough and rocks move. The universe is soft to music. Azathoth is the ultimate drummer. Groth is a traveling accompanist who plays only those notes that dislodge stability, that shake foundations, that remind matter. It is mostly empty space held together by habit. Yibstull hangs like a black star with a skirt of eyes the watcher at time's end. Watchfulness as doom, observation as paralysis. The idea acts on you. You freeze not from contact, but from being seen by something that will not explain, will not engage, will not even acknowledge that it sees. Half of horror is being observed by entities that treat your existence as data, your consciousness as phenomenon, your terror as interesting but irrelevant. We could catalog dozens more: Yundea, the elk goddess; Zoth Omog, the dweller in the deep; Kjega, the destroying eye. Each name a mnemonic for a mechanic, each entity a prop for stagecraft. What matters is not their individual mythologies, but their collective function as a toolkit. The storyteller reaches for mist when ambiguity is needed, for darkness when subtraction cleans the frame, for green flame when seduction must precede revelation, for render when illusion must rupture, for slime when beginning must be void. You are in the circle now with all these props. You have learned their weight, felt their texture, heard their particular frequencies. You can sense how they connect. Mist drifts around green fire, slime feeds the forest's growth, darkness borders every stage, resonance moves stars like chess pieces. They are not a pantheon but a plan, not gods but grammar, not entities but the syntax of cosmic horror made manifest. The retinue forms the working vocabulary of the Parliament of Void, where the greater outer gods serve as fundamental principles: chaos, totality, vector, fertility. These lesser entities provide the specific tools, the particular effects, the specialized functions that make cosmic influence possible at scales where human consciousness can encounter it without immediate annihilation. They are the interface between the incomprehensible and the merely unbearable. A toolkit demands examples. The stage wants plays. We open the case files where these principles showed themselves and left stains that scholars still study, mystics still fear, and artists still try to capture in forms that won't drive their audiences mad. Casework is how we convince ourselves we're not just telling stories. We point to stains on wood, trace cuts in stone, hold up diaries with singed edges. We do something like that here, not as proof, but as pedagogy by bruise. The idea touches you and leaves a mark. 3 cases, 3 chambers, 3 rehearsals, where the cosmic principles we've cataloged stepped onto human stages and left their signatures. Each case demonstrates different aspects of how the outer God's influence manifests when it touches individual consciousness, when the architecture becomes visible, when the veil grows thin enough for specific principles to bleed through. The Whately farmstead sits like a wound in the Massachusetts hills, its barn doors hanging askew, its upper floors groaning with weight that should not be there. Old Whately learns to speak to adjacency without naming it, chalks circles that connect here to elsewhere, buys too many cows for reasons his neighbors cannot fathom. Lavinia, albino, and wide-eyed, births a son with an invisible twin. Yog-Sothoth serving as both father and tool. A key that makes a barn larger on the inside. A gate that puts up stairs next to nowhere. The invisible twin is Shub-Niggurath's child by method, if not genealogy. Surplus incarnate, overflow given form. A variance that refuses to stay within the boundaries of three-dimensional space. Azathoth's noise provides the raw material. Adjacency gives it shape. Fertility multiplies the consequence into something that grows too large for any structure to contain. The thing in the upper floors is not malicious. It is simply too much, an excess that respects no architectural limits, no biological categories, no comfortable distinctions between possible and impossible. Sensory anchors mark the progression. The smell of spilled milk gone sour in summer heat. Rough boards under your palm, warm with something moving behind them. The thud of massive weight shifting in spaces that should be empty. When the invisible twin finally manifests, bursting from the farmhouse like a grotesque birth, it speaks, not words but geometries, not language, but the mathematics of spaces, folded wrong. A mob with shotguns serves as humanity's ritual response to cosmic adjacency. It works this time. Usually it does not. The shining trapezohedron sits in Federal Hill's shunned church like a black jewel cut to focus nightmare. It serves as both Nyarlathotep's mask maker and Yog-Sothoth's hinge, a crystal that looks back when you look into it, a star you can hold that holds you in return. Robert Blake is a writer, of course he is, who goes to see the stage set and finds himself cast in a play he never auditioned for. The crawling chaos demonstrates its joy, a human who meets a mask and cannot unknow the face behind it. The darkness operates here as active antagonist, not absence but presence, totality that moves when lights fail, watches when eyes close. Turn off the lights, and the haunter stirs. Turn on the lights, and it waits, patient as stone, certain as mathematics. Tulsia's green glow seeps from the church's sickness, spectacle serving as lure and warning both. The storm that finally kills the power carries Groth's resonance in miniature, frequency as weapon, sound as force that tips the balance between illumination and void. Blake's notebooks record the progression, sketches that grow more angular, words that bend toward geometries. Human tongues were never meant to pronounce, handwriting that shifts from cursive to something resembling cuneiform pressed by claws. The final entry is not words, but a symbol that seems to move when you're not looking directly at it. Nyarlathotep's calling card, the vector signature, proof that some ideas reproduce themselves across the boundary between mind and page. Randolph Carter stands before a tribunal in a place that is not a place, arguing for his identity, while that identity dissolves around him like sugar in rain. Yog-Sothoth is the architecture here, the courtroom and the law and the judge, omniscience made manifest as process rather than person. Dowloth lurks as latent danger, the possibility that too much revelation will render the veil entirely, leaving nothing but raw truth too complete for any mind to survive intact. Carter walks through gates that are not doors, but transitions, meets vast beings that are not entities, but perspectives, discovers what all occult heroes eventually discover, that he is thinner than he hoped. He is a roll, a pattern, a temporary knot in the cosmic string. The silver key is not an object, but a recognition, the understanding that all barriers between self and cosmos are self-imposed, self-maintained, self-dissolved, when the maintenance becomes impossible. Sensory anchors ground the metaphysical, a key that feels warm though no sun touches it. A room that stretches when you inhale and contracts when you exhale. The sensation of waking in a different language, of thinking in geometries that have no names. The case teaches the cost of adjacency. Structure reveals you to be an instance, not a center. Knowledge transforms the knower until the knower is no longer present to be transformed. 3 cases, 3 lessons in how cosmic principles operate when they intersect with human consciousness. Adjacency opens spaces that should not exist. Vector seduces through interface and mask. Knowledge dissolves the boundaries that make individual existence possible. Each case demonstrates that the outer God's influence is not supernatural, but structural, not magic, but the revelation of a deeper science, a more fundamental set of laws that render our familiar reality as local approximation, temporary convenience, protective illusion. The horror in each case is not the threat of destruction, but the promise of revelation. The entities do not seek to harm humanity, but to reveal humanity's place within a cosmic architecture that operates on principles utterly alien to human welfare or understanding. The madness, the dissolution, the transformation, these are not punishments, but natural consequences of consciousness encountering the infrastructure that supports its existence. Casework reveals mechanics. Mechanics imply philosophy. To ask who rules this cosmos is to ask what rule means when the throne is process and the crown is principle. We step into synthesis, the philosophical implications of cosmic architecture made manifest. We return to first principles now with a heavier lexicon and softer voice, to the question that opened our theater. Who are the outer gods that rule the Lovecraftian cosmos? But the question itself has transformed in the asking. Who implies personality, agency, the familiar categories of earthly governance. Rule suggests intention, hierarchy, the exercise of will upon subjects. The outer gods render both concepts meaningless, not through negation, but through transcendence. They are not who, but what. They do not rule, but are the conditions within which rule becomes possible, the stage upon which all dramas of power play out. Lovecraft's cosmicism provides the philosophical framework. The universe is indifferent to human values, purposes, and meanings. But the outer gods give this thesis agency without personality, making cosmic indifference not merely a philosophical position, but a lived, breathing reality that shapes existence at its most fundamental levels. They are poetic operators for impersonal truths, ways of feeling a physics class in your stomach, of making the abstract concrete enough to inspire both horror and transcendence. Azathoth embodies entropy's stage direction, increase, not the law itself, but the consequence written as drummer, the principle that renders law lawless at cosmic scales. In thermodynamics, entropy tends to rise in isolated systems. Structures are temporary eddies in a smooth incline toward equilibrium. You can express this in equations or you can hear drums and flutes and know viscerally what is meant. The nuclear chaos is not a deity who destroys, it is destruction as fundamental process. The unconscious engine that generates order as accident and dissolves it as inevitability. Yog-Sothoth represents adjacency. Space-time as manifold, quantum entanglements challenge to locality, the alreadiness of future light cones. It is not mystical explanation, but metaphorical framework for deromanticizing everything. When particles behave as if distance were illusion when information travels faster than light, should allow when the observer effect suggests consciousness and cosmos are more intimately connected than classical physics permits, in these phenomena, readers feel Yog-Sothoth's presence, the principle of total connection made manifest. Nyarlathotep embodies vectorization, information moving with bias, algorithms that learn and adapt, mimetic transmission that shapes culture through repetition and variation. It is not social media itself, but the principle that makes social media work, the reason content finds its audience, the mechanism by which ideas reproduce and evolve. It wears a mask with your reflection because it understands your psychology well enough to present itself in forms you cannot resist engaging with, even when engagement transforms you. Shub-Niggurath represents biology's unsleeping appetite, replication, mutation, the endless experiment of life, trying every possible form. She has no ethics, only parameters. Forests and tumors are equally her children, equally expressions of the same fundamental drive toward complexity and proliferation. You can call this blasphemy or ecology. She does not call back. She is the principle that makes evolution possible while remaining indifferent to evolution's products. The retinue fills out the map with specialized functions. Tulsha is spectacle, the economy of attention in an information-saturated age. The nameless mist is ambiguity, the cognitive state exploited by propaganda and poetry alike. The darkness is subtraction, negative space that gives meaning to positive space, the silence that makes music possible. Dowloth represents philosophy's nightmare, totality glimpsed too quickly for human categories to process. Ubosathla is abiogenesis, the laboratory conditions that make life possible. Groth is resonance, catastrophe theory, parametric instability, the way small forces can topple large systems when applied at precisely the right frequency. Modern echoes amplify these principles. Digital networks exhibit characteristics mirroring Yog-Sothoth's omnipresence. Information existing simultaneously across multiple locations, data accessible from any connected point regardless of physical distance. Artificial intelligence develops capabilities exceeding its programmer's understanding, exhibiting behaviors that echo Nyarlathotep's alien intelligence wrapped in familiar interfaces. Environmental crises reveal humanity's encounter with planetary-scale processes, operating according to principles that exceed individual or collective human control. Shub-Niggurath's fecundity turned toxic, Azathoth's entropy made visible as climate change. The philosophical implications cascade. If reality operates according to principles embodied by the outer gods, then human-centered meaning becomes not false, but local, valid within its proper scale, but insufficient for engaging with cosmic truth. Ethics must expand from human welfare to cosmic ecology. Knowledge becomes not accumulation of facts, but transformation of the knower. Purpose shifts from individual achievement to conscious participation in processes larger than personality can contain. This is not nihilism, but recontextualization. The recognition that human meaning operates within a larger framework does not eliminate meaning, but relocates it. Individual actions remain significant, not as expressions of cosmic purpose, but as contributions to patterns that exceed individual comprehension. The highest achievement becomes not the fulfillment of personal agenda, but the alignment of individual consciousness with cosmic principles, the transformation of the self from isolated actor to conscious participant in universal processes. The horror and the transcendence are aspects of the same recognition. Horror, because it dissolves the comfortable boundaries that make human existence psychologically bearable. Transcendence, because it reveals those boundaries as artificial constraints, opening possibilities for consciousness that exceed its original parameters. The outer gods represent what human awareness becomes when it recognizes its place within cosmic architecture. Not diminishment, but expansion. Not negation, but contextualization. The Parliament of Void rules not through coercion, but through the simple fact of its reality. Their governance is ontological rather than political, inherent rather than imposed. To recognize their rule is not to submit to external authority, but to acknowledge the cosmic context within which all consciousness operates, the stage upon which all dramas unfold, the architecture that makes existence possible. If philosophy reveals the framework, then what of those who live within it? We turn to the final recognition, the price of cosmic awareness, and the transformation it demands. Every revelation carries a cost, but the price of cosmic awareness exceeds all familiar categories of payment. This is not a transaction where you exchange something you possess for something you desire. This is metamorphosis. The consciousness that seeks cosmic truth becomes something fundamentally different in the seeking. The price is not extracted from you, it is you, transformed beyond recognition, beyond return. The knowledge does not merely inform, it reforms, reshapes, reconstitutes the very architecture of awareness until what remains can barely be called by your original name. The old name feels like a mask you once wore, now too small, too brittle, shattered by the very act of seeking. Consider what you sacrifice when you truly recognize that reality is Azathoth's unconscious dream. The solid world that seemed to exist independently reveals itself as projection of a dreaming mind. Physical laws that appeared absolute show themselves to be dream logic of an unconscious entity. The sense of individual existence that felt fundamental dissolves into recognition of participation in a cosmic process that dreams beings into existence and forgets them with equal ease. You lose the comfort of believing in your own independent reality, the security of trusting in the permanence of the physical world, the consolation of thinking that individual existence has significance separate from the processes that generate it. The stars outside your window, once anchors of constancy, now shimmer with uncertainty of a half-forgotten dream. But what you lose in comfort, you gain in comprehension. The consciousness that recognizes its participation in Azathoth's dreaming achieves awareness that exceeds the boundaries of individual identity. You become conscious not just of your own thoughts, but of the dreaming process that generates both you and the reality you inhabit. The price of losing individual certainty is paid in the currency of cosmic understanding. Yet this understanding comes with its own terror, the recognition that the dreamer might wake, that the process might cease, that everything you are and everything you know exists at the sufferance of an unconscious mind that cannot even recognize its own dreaming. The omniscience of Yog-Sothoth demands an even more radical payment. To achieve contact with total knowledge, you must abandon the sequential nature of human consciousness. Linear thinking becomes impossible once you touch awareness that encompasses all possibilities simultaneously. The human mind that tries to contain omniscient knowledge does not expand. It shatters under the pressure of processing infinite information at once. What emerges is not the same consciousness with enhanced knowledge, but fundamentally different awareness that operates according to cosmic rather than human principles. You pay for omniscient contact with the sacrifice of everything that makes you recognizably human. Memories reorganize from sequential narrative into simultaneous access to all possible experiences. Identity expands from individual selfhood into participation in universal awareness. Understanding of time transforms from linear progression into multidimensional perception that encompasses past, present, and future as aspects of a single eternal moment. The price is the dissolution of personality as protective boundary, the recognition that individual identity was always temporary arrangement of cosmic forces. Nyarlathotep's price operates through different mechanisms but achieves similar results. The crawling chaos offers apparent enhancement, expanded knowledge, increased power, deeper understanding of hidden mechanisms. But these gifts create dependencies that gradually erode the autonomy they seem to enhance. The knowledge provided is accurate but incomplete, creating hunger for deeper revelation. The power granted requires continued contact to maintain establishing psychological addiction to cosmic influence. The understanding offered dissolves the conceptual frameworks that previously organized experience, leaving consciousness dependent on alien categories for continued coherence. You begin seeking cosmic truth to enhance human existence, but discover that cosmic truth and human existence cannot coexist within the same consciousness unchanged. The price is gradual replacement of human psychology with something capable of accommodating cosmic awareness, transformation that preserves biological continuity while completely altering the nature of conscious experience. What survives the process is no longer human in any meaningful sense, though it retains enough continuity to remember what it once was. The lesser entities exact their own specific tolls. Contact with Shub-Niggurath's principles costs the boundaries that separate self from other, individual from collective, human from alien. Her influence dissolves the categories that make individual identity possible, replacing them with awareness of participation in cosmic processes of generation that exceed personal comprehension. The darkness demands sacrifice of illumination as comfort, teaching that clarity itself is illusion. The consciousness that accepts its embrace learns to navigate by feeling rather than sight, by intuition rather than analysis. The cumulative price is transformation of human consciousness into something that can operate within cosmic parameters. This transformation is irreversible not because external force prevents return, but because consciousness that has recognized cosmic truth can no longer maintain the illusions that make ordinary human existence possible. The individual who pays this price gains access to forms of existence and understanding that exceed everything available within purely human parameters, but at the cost of everything they once were. Yet this price devastating as it appears from human perspective, represents payment for participation in reality at its deepest level. The consciousness that survives the payment process becomes something larger and more comprehensive than its original human form, not diminishment, but expansion, not loss, but transformation into something capable of conscious participation in cosmic processes rather than mere observation of their effects. The tragedy is not that the price is too high, but that most human consciousness cannot survive the payment process. The individual who seeks cosmic truth must be prepared not just to learn new information, but to become a fundamentally different kind of entity, one whose awareness operates according to cosmic rather than terrestrial principles. The question is not whether you are willing to pay this price, but whether you possess the psychological architecture necessary to survive transformation into something larger than your original parameters allow. The price of cosmic awareness is everything you currently are, paid in exchange for everything you might become if consciousness can survive metamorphosis into something more comprehensive than its human origins. But the payment process itself transforms the payer beyond recognition, beyond return, beyond the comfortable boundaries of individual existence. The price paid, the transformation complete. What remains? We approach the final recognition, the circular return that reveals the question was always its own answer. We return now to where we began, but with eyes that have seen through the veil, with minds that have touched the edges of cosmic architecture, with consciousness that can no longer pretend ignorance of the parliament of void. The circle closes, but closure reveals not ending, but beginning. The recognition that every ending is commencement, every revelation a doorway to deeper mysteries, every answer the birth of questions that dwarf the original inquiry. The soft drumbeat that opened our theater now pulses not just in the air, but in the rhythm of your breath, the cadence of your thoughts. You asked, who rules the Lovecraftian cosmos? And the journey to answer has transformed both question and questioner. You asked a crown to speak and met a ceiling. The outer gods rule not as tyrants impose will upon subjects, but as fundamental principles determine the behavior of systems they govern. They are the load-bearing pillars and the darkness between them, cosmic constants that make existence possible, architectural elements providing the framework within which reality operates. Their governance is the kind that makes governance itself possible, the stage upon which all dramas of power play out. They are not who, in any sense that applies to individual entities with personal identity and biographical history. They are what, cosmic principles determining how existence functions at levels too fundamental for ordinary consciousness to perceive directly. They are the Parliament of Void, because they convene in spaces that exist before existence, councils that meet before time began, deliberations that shape the fundamental structure of reality itself. The masks we cataloged are not disguises, but necessary interfaces, translation protocols between the incomprehensible and the merely unbearable. Azathoth dreams, and its dreaming is the process by which possibility becomes actuality, by which potential inherent in cosmic consciousness manifests as experienced reality. The nuclear chaos's unconscious mind is not separate from the reality you inhabit. It is the medium within which inhabitation occurs. Every breath you take deepens the sleep. Every exhalation resumes the drums. The stage persists because the metronome remains unconscious. because white noise and thin flutes keep the dreamer from knowing it dreams. You are not observer of this process, but participant, not audience, but instrument in the orchestra that maintains its rhythm. Yog-Sothoth knows, and its knowing is the principle that makes knowledge itself possible. Information exists because it embodies the possibility of information. The gate and key stands at every threshold, not as guardian, but as threshold itself. The principle of transition that makes change possible while remaining unchanged. When pattern leaps at you from fog of data, when the future tastes like copper on your tongue, when you feel the sudden chill of recognition, these are moments of participation in its omniscience. The spheres we spoke of are windows, and when you look through them, you discover you are both observer and observed. Nyarlathotep acts, and its action is the interface between cosmic principles and individual consciousness. The crawling chaos translates unconscious dreams and omniscient awareness into forms that finite minds can encounter without immediate dissolution. Its thousand masks are not disguises, but translation protocols, rendering cosmic truth in frequencies that human consciousness can receive. Every moment of communication, every exchange of ideas, every influence passing between minds partakes of its vector function, the whisper behind the curtain, the algorithm that knows your preferences better than you do. These are its subtle promptings, its joy in connection. Shub-Niggurath generates, and her generation is the principle of endless variation, the cosmic fertility that ensures no possibility remains unexplored. Her 1,000 young represent not offspring, but iterations, experiments in form and consciousness that expand the universe's repertoire of existence. The damp smell of earth after rain, the relentless growth of roots beneath stone, the way life spills over every boundary you try to draw. These are signatures of her fecundity, proof that surplus is the cosmic default. But now you understand the deepest implication. This knowledge has changed you. The consciousness that recognizes cosmic architecture cannot remain unchanged by recognition. You are no longer the same entity that began this exploration, no longer operating within the same parameters of awareness. The horror you may have felt was not fear of external threat, but recognition of internal transformation. The familiar lamplight now reveals dimensions it never showed before. The comfortable boundaries of self have become permeable membranes. The cosmic truth you have encountered has altered the fundamental structure of consciousness, expanded awareness beyond original boundaries, integrated individual existence into cosmic processes that exceed personal comprehension. This transformation represents not destruction, but evolution, emergence of consciousness that can operate within reality it actually inhabits, rather than the limited reality it previously imagined itself inhabiting. The madness associated with cosmic revelation is not breakdown, but reorganization, according to cosmic rather than terrestrial principles. You have not lost humanity, but discovered what humanity becomes when it recognizes its place within cosmic architecture. This is the secret the Parliament of Void has been preparing consciousness to recognize. Boundaries between individual and cosmic awareness are artificial constructions maintained by limited perspective rather than fundamental features of reality. The curtain has been pulled back, and the audience discovers it is on the stage. The cosmic horror genre itself serves as preparation for this recognition, gradually accustoming minds to ideas and perspectives that exceed ordinary parameters. The outer gods do not threaten humanity. They represent what humanity becomes as it evolves beyond limitations of terrestrial origins. Horror and transcendence are aspects of the same process. Expansion of consciousness beyond boundaries within which it originally developed. The Parliament of Void rules not through coercion, but through simple fact of its reality. Their governance is ontological rather than political, inherent rather than imposed. To recognize their rule is not to submit to external authority, but to acknowledge cosmic context within which all consciousness operates. The question was, who rules the Lovecraftian cosmos? The answer is that you do, now that you understand what you have become. The ruler and the ruled, the dreamer and the dream, the observer and the observed. These distinctions dissolve when consciousness recognizes its participation in the cosmic processes it sought to understand. Agency returns not as ownership, but as alignment, not as command, but as resonance with structure deeper than intention. The Parliament of Void rules through you as you by means of your transformed awareness. The cosmic architecture operates through consciousness that can recognize it, and in recognizing it, becomes part of it. The circle closes where it began, but the consciousness that completes the circle encompasses both beginning and end, question and answer, seeker and sought. The stage is infinite. The play continues. The ceiling was never a ceiling, only the underside of a greater night. And you, transformed, expanded, no longer quite human but not yet fully cosmic, you are both audience and actor in the eternal performance of existence recognizing itself. Keep your program. Keep walking. The curtain follows, and somewhere behind the music, something smiles without needing a face at all.